And we're recording. Welcome back, guys. My name is Ben Fellows. Today I'm joined by Joe Emison. Joe is the co-founder and CTO of Branch Insurance. It looks like also have been a CTO in the past, as well as a number of leadership positions in the engineering side of things. Joe, thanks for joining me.
I'm happy to be here.
So Joe, walk me through kind of over your career. How's your relationship with QA evolved? What's your perspective on QA as an industry today? How have your viewpoint shifted? Give me the backstory.
Yeah, I think a lot of I'm trying to think back to how I used to think about QA. I initially I was a solo software developer 25 years ago. And so QA was something I had to do in order to get the software out the door. And then as I started building companies and my companies were acquired and I was brought into other companies, I saw all sorts of different ways of building software and all sorts of different ways of running QA. The evolution I've really gone through is in seeing QA as an absolutely critical aspect of hitting key metrics and being a modern software development organization and being an effective modern software development organization. Really needing to have QA, having good QA team members, but especially having that integrated into a modern software development lifecycle.
Awesome. And would you say most of your background's in the startup space, the enterprise space? Like, set the stage a little bit for size of company, kind of development team.
Yeah, I've started 6 companies from scratch. A number of them have been acquired into larger companies. So like I became the CIO of a company with, I think something like 1,500 employees. I have also been a consulting CTO and interim CTO in companies and divisions of companies up to, tens of thousands of employees, at least in a parent company, in which I was in, a division of hundreds of employees. I've never been like the CTO of a company with 30,000 people, but I've certainly worked with development organizations in the hundreds of software developers.
And so what's an more interesting topic to you? QA in the startup space or QA in the enterprise space? Which one has more challenges in your mind? I mean, I know they're both very different beasts. So which one is which one has more challenges in your opinion?
If I'm running the startup and I'm the CTO of the startup, that's much easier. Being in an enterprise, especially if when I have inherited teams within an enterprise, that's always very difficult. It's difficult because of the people, though. It's not difficult because of the discipline. My experience as a personal experience, I have, I think, 100% retention over my career. So I've had, more than 100 people have directly reported to me over my career, and probably close to like 170. I don't think I've had one regrettable attrition. But when I've taken over teams, and I've taken over probably 18 different teams or so in my career, I have like a 50% success rate on takeover. And I think that's largely because when I hire you, I set expectations, and I'm very good at like holding those expectations. But if you were hired by somebody else and then you're working for me, like the chance that those expectations are the same is very low. And a lot of people, there's a quote which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And, it just means that you hire somebody in, they have expectations, they get a new boss. They're much more likely to just fight against whatever's different. And so I think that's the largest challenge in the enterprise is you're always dealing with people that you didn't hire, that you didn't set up for success, and that you need to do things differently. And that's very challenging.
When you take over a team, what's the first change related to QA that you oftentimes find yourself making? That's a very specific question. Did I lose you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it glitched for a second, but it's fine. I just paused, so repeat the question.
No, you're totally fine. I was saying, when you take over a team, what's the first change in QA you find yourself making most often when you're taking over a new team that you've not hired yourself?
I make everybody read Accelerate now. The most important thing that I want people to understand is that the sort of the core metric that matters is how often we're releasing.
Okay.
And then I view that as the primary DORA metric. And then the foundational metrics underneath that are you have to have small scoped work, you have to be constantly merging back into trunk, you have to have a way to respond quickly when there are issues after you release. And you ideally don't want to have errors, 90% of the time you release that you have to address. And so the very first thing I try to do is get everyone aligned on this is what we're going to optimize for. And, it depends on the organization if I have this level of control, but certainly in the organizations I've started, we don't do burn up, we don't do burn down, we don't play poker, we don't estimate largely. There are obviously some cases where you have to estimate software development work to coordinate with teams for a launch, but I don't know, 9 out of 10 tickets at Branch, there's no estimate ever made. No one makes an effort to estimate them. People make an effort. We make an effort to prioritize them, but our goal is just to release all the time and release with a low error rate. And if we can get everyone to agree to that, and that means not just the people on the QA team, not just the developers, but like all of the peer executives, like the CEO, the COO, the CMO, CRO, whatever it is. If everyone agrees, okay, I'm not going to ask you how many points you delivered this week. I'm not going to ask you to give me a roadmap to the minute for the next 3 months. I spend a lot of my time trying to get people to understand that, and I make them read Accelerate. I'll only have a conversation with you about this and a debate about this if you've read this book and you understand why this is what we should optimize for. And so if everyone gets on the same page about we're optimizing for frequency of release, that then helps pave the way, and then you can have great conversations within QA and within software dev about, okay, remember we're optimizing for this, your bonus is going to be based on this, right? Everything we present to everyone's going to be based on this. We're going to celebrate, when we can do multiple releases a week. So, and you're going to get all these benefits from it, right? Which you're going to love, but now here are the things you have to do differently in order to achieve it.
And so when you're optimizing, oh, by the way, so it's Accelerate, and this is Nicole Forsgren. Sorry, I can't. I'm bad at reading and pronouncing names. Just for folks that don't know the book, and I'd recommend. And is so I'll also put that in the link because I think that I actually need to go read that book right after this. I've not read it.
It's an absolutely. There is. I'll also give you a cheat sheet, although you should buy the book and support Nicole and Jez and Gene. But they did an interview with the A16Z podcast. When it came out, that is like a 60-minute, overview of what's in it. If you're looking for the cheat sheet on the book, but I find the book very useful because when I'm having these conversations with executives, if we both read it, first of all, if I have someone saying you need to play poker, you need to give me a roadmap, and I say I need you to read this book, and then we can have a conversation about it. They have to then read the book. And if they don't read the book, it's like, look, I gave you the tool to have the conversation, but this is my area of expertise. If you're not even going to read the book, you don't get a say, And hopefully you have a CEO who supports you in this measure, right? You might not, but good organizations will.
So then optimizing about frequency of release, walk me through QA's role in that, because I would imagine there's a lot of different possibilities, right? Thinking about automation, thinking about even stuff like ephemeral environments, thinking about some of all of the different areas that are going to allow you to have more frequent releases. In your viewpoint, what is QA's role in that process?
So QA is critical. You must have automated QA. There's no way you can release multiple times a week unless you have very good automated QA. So when we started looking at automated QA in the role of continuous integration, call it 2006 to 2008, there was a lot of belief that 1, unit tests were really important, and 2, developers needed to write all of these things. 1, unit tests are important and useful, but that's not actually what protects. It is the feature, it is the integration tests or whatever you want to call them, end-to-end tests, smoke tests. Those are the ones that actually protect. I would say at Branch, we release roughly once or twice a day. The releases that are blocked due to finding bugs are all the end-to-end tests. Like the unit tests are,
Yeah.
and the errors that unit tests find are usually yeah, I mean, we fixed them, but they're usually not things that would be that problematic. So, I mean, if the end-to-end test pass, that is. So, what we have discovered though with modern tooling is that we don't need developers to write these tests. And guess what? Developers aren't good at it. Like the benefit of having people in QA with a specialty in QA, especially if they have taken the time to learn new tooling, is you don't have to be a software developer. And in fact, I think it's helpful if you're not to write highly effective automated tests. There are a lot of platforms that you can use. At Branch, we use one called Testim, TESTIM.io, that's owned by Tricentis. We think it's fantastic. And that's it. But we have dedicated QA team members who build those tests in Testim, and our developers don't do it. When I had teams of developers building these tests before there were tools like Testim that really worked well. So now I'm talking like 2016-ish. It was like a quarter of our developers' time was spent updating these tests. It is an amazing productivity boost to go from, you lose a quarter of all of your developers' time to you have a couple, full-time QA staff. We do employ fewer QA team members, as a sort of per developer, let's say, or per teams of developers than I was 10 years ago. But the QA team members get paid a lot more, are a lot more strategic, and I mean, I think they enjoy their jobs a lot better too, because it is a much more of a strategic role.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? From a boss who understands that it's a strategic role. I think there's a lot of other QA who are looking for that. And actually, it's interesting listening to this because I'm picturing the CTO who hears, okay, these guys release twice a day and there's automation. And then they go to their QA person. They're like, make this happen, right? And immediately there's alarm bells about maintenance and trying to make sure that there's communication. Walk me through the processes that you guys are doing around your QA that allow this to be possible, because without that, your automation is going to become very hard to maintain and very out of date very fast. Things are going to be breaking that aren't actually bugs because there's new features and they don't know to update the automation. What processes do you have that make this possible for your QA department?
I mean, so the QA department builds and maintains the test suite and the individual tests in Testim. It runs. It's run before there would be any release. And when tests fail in it, whoever the developer is or the VP engineering or whoever's running the release goes and looks at the errors that come up, if there are errors, and can see pretty quickly, because of the way Testim works, can see, oh, that's a new feature. And then makes a call about, okay, well, and often what will happen is they'll just manually do what is the test. I mean, the test, part of the QA, the strategic QA piece is designing the test and describing the test and laying out the test and documenting the test in a way such that somebody can look at it, see that it's failed, and just go manually do the work of it. And then just verify manually, oh, no, that's a new feature, and then do the release and then mark it. All of these test results go into a Slack channel. Literally what will happen is when these fail, whoever did it or saw it, if it wasn't someone on the QA team, we'll just tag someone on the QA team and say, hey, we need to update these tests because the new feature. And they'll do it same day. I mean, Testim is just, it's, we probably, I don't know, we're probably coming up on 40, 50 different tests in Testim per application. And, it just doesn't seem to take them that long to do the updates. I think I think it is really important to keep these things somewhat asynchronous. The benefit of unit tests is you should block your merges on them, and you should have those flags, and you should have some way of running your end-to-end suite kind of on demand within a reasonable amount of time, and then it needs to have all the retry and logic there. But we don't do anything in which we shift the end-to-end tests all the way left, because it just in practice, you run into exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to block the merge on the test update. What you want to do is just give a warning on the release.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Do you have a perspective on? No, it did actually, it did, right? Because I mean, there's immediate things, right? I think people are trying to do things with the wrong tool set oftentimes. I think there's a handful of really good tool sets, and then I think there's a lot of challenging tool sets that make a lot of these things harder than they are. And just like there's private tools, there's actually some great open source tools too. And then ultimately it's just communication process. It's interesting to hear that you guys aren't trying to necessarily update your automation tests before they're hitting a test environment, like something like trying to do like a more of like a TDD or BDD. And I'm curious your perspective on TDD or BDD, and does that even factor into how way that you think about the world?
Yeah, I generally view TDD. I'm fine if a developer likes that model, but I find it to be like very inefficient. The general philosophy that we have a cultural book and set of principles we call our roots, the branch roots. And one of them is called This is V1. And it's a view of like, you should be downscoping everything, and you should be humble about the fact that anything you're building probably when it releases like won't actually work as well as you think it will, right? And this, I've seen this over the last 25 years. Like, as the scope of what you're building increases, the likelihood that you're going to have to redo lots of it for it to even be functional after release is very high. So everyone who's trying to shift left a lot of work that's dependent on an underlying assumption that we know what we're doing and we've designed this well and this will be usable and solve the problem it was intended to, is just waste. It's just as wasteful as waterfall. It's sort of like the backwards way. Like, waterfall is wasteful. You spent too much time up front defining something. You should have gotten feedback. But like this, like update your tests and do TDD is like the reverse part of that waste getting shoved into the pipeline. You instead, and in my view, certainly, you instead should have this view that's like, it's okay to have some amount of bugs. You should be humble and realize that like, as soon as you build anything and put it in front of users, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff and you're going to want to change it. And so you should just optimize for, how do I get it out? How do I, one, teach everyone around me to downscope things? And so we spend a lot of time working with stakeholders and helping them understand, like, no, smaller, right? And we spend a lot of time helping people understand bugs in production are not like, I remember these conversations with the executive I had early on that we had who had come from, many years at these large insurers. And she was just blown away. She was like, that's a bug. That has to be fixed before we do anything else. And I was like, why? I was like, there are lots of bugs in all of the software you use all the time that have never been addressed, because like, it's not a good prioritization. Just get comfortable with the fact that there will be bugs in some things. Like, that's a weird optimization factor, is like, all the bugs should be gone, because I promise you can find bugs. And then, when we hire QA people initially, they'll go beat on stuff and like create a bunch of tickets, blah, 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 and I'll go through them and I'll say, how does this relate to our 2023 plan or 2022 plan? How does this relate to our plan? How does this solve our plan? This bug has there are people, everyone has figured out how to work around this issue. Why are we solving it? And it's just like helping people understand, like, if our goal, we have a mission as a company, if we're going to solve that mission, as soon as we elevate something like every bug must be fixed, or we must have no bugs in production, or we must have TDD on everything, or we must have this blah, blah, blah. Like, all of those things are actually counterproductive to the thing we're trying to accomplish as an organization. So let's just get on the page of like the one primary thing we're optimizing for. Let's get comfortable with non-zero error rates. And then let's optimize for get it out, learn, iterate quickly. So the commitment I always want to make to a stakeholder is you downscope it, we'll get it out fast, and we'll revise it quickly. And it will not be, and there will be imperfection the whole way.
Yeah.
And just get comfortable with that. And in the end,
it's interesting, right?
Everyone comes around to this. Everyone's like, I would never want it any other way. It's like absolutely the best way to accomplish business goals, but it requires a lot of executive, like, helping people understand, I need you to think about this differently than you have thought about it in other places.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, right? There's rethinking your relationship with customers and trying to understand the root of the customer. I mean, it's just to sum this up for you, because for my own head, so why write automation for a feature that's likely wrong anyways? Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you? Which is like, why spend the time writing a bunch of automation for a feature that we're going to release and is likely sort of wrong and needs to be fixed? Wow, that 20 minutes went really fast, Joe. I appreciate it. I could probably ask you questions for a lot more, but I want to keep these things at 20 minutes-ish. I'm just trying to sort through. I have 5 other questions here, but I'll choose one, and then someday I'd love the opportunity to kind of do a follow-up and pick your brain more, because I think other people will find this super valuable. Downscoping, when it comes to just, in general, your kind of relationship with that end of the world, is it something that you feel like every organization's capable of doing? They're just not willing to do it. Like I've actually not heard downscoping much, so I'm interested in this sort of, where did you find it? Where has this come from? Like, how has this evolved for you in your career? And I know that has nothing to do with QA, but there's sort of, and I'm just more curious to end on that.
Yeah, it is. And I actually think, like, I often will say, like, the most valuable thing I do is downscope things in the organization. I mean, it is one of the reasons why I like being a founder. You know, there were 2 of us at Branch, call it 4 years ago. There are now like over 500 of us at Branch. But like, I was there at the beginning. I'm the founder. I can go around. I have a lot of influence on people. That helps. And it is the most valuable thing I can do, I think, to help people cut scope. So, organizations that have acquired, my company, and then I've gone to work for them as executive, I've had nowhere near the ability to influence it in the same way. So I'm very empathetic with people who are like, I don't know how I would do that in my organization. So I do think I think every organization is capable of it. I think you may need to go find that founder or most influential person in the company, and you may need to help them understand why it's really important that we, as an organization, cut scope. But I would say that everything that we do highly effectively at Branch would be absolutely impossible if there were large scoped items. Because what happens is, as soon as you start having big scoped items, then once you release them, you can't keep working on them because you've got something else big waiting that you have to move to. As soon as you do that, as soon as you don't give people the ability to like update and iterate right after release, they will refuse to downscope even more. And they will keep throwing everything they can. And you will get these pitched battles in your organization in which executives know, like, if I don't put the whole kitchen sink in here, everything that might possibly be necessary, I'm not going to go see that dev team for another 18 months, So, like, I got to get it in because if I'm going to hit any of my numbers, I got to do it. And so you've created this behavior. And so if you don't have the ability to downscope, you actually can't. I would say if you can't downscope, you basically can't hit the DORA metrics meaningfully. And so now I think the DORA team might quibble and say, like, well, you can keep releasing and feature flag stuff out, and you can build these like really big things very slowly and like have them go live eventually. The problem is you still have this issue that if it's large in scope and it hasn't actually been in front of users and you haven't run the cycle with users, then like as soon as you turn it on, if it's very big, it will fail. And you'll realize there's so much more work you have to do. So, I mean, one other observation here is, and the conversation that I would have in an organization where I'm trying to convince the leaders in the organization that we should cut scope, is I would try to help them understand, if we're building something new, right? Our success is based upon the number of cycles we get against real users in production. I will tell you, we need 50 cycles. So if your goal is we're going to scope this and release it as a knife edge cutover as a replacement for something that's different, right? We built V2 next gen, right? And it's going to take, we estimate it's going to take 6 months. It actually ends up taking 18, and we put it live. Guess what's that one cycle? If you want to have 50 cycles at 18 months each, you can. We'll all be dead before we get to any sort of level of quality. So if instead we ask, how do we release every twice a week? Then we'll know in 6 months. and it'll be great. And I promise it will be great. You know, that's the thing. But if you can't, I mean, there's, you know, there are executives who will just not understand that as well. I mean, I've met them.
Yeah. Joe, I really appreciate the time. And for any QA person listening to this, Joe, you have a blog. I know it's quite technical in nature, but I enjoyed reading some of it. I am blanking on the website, which makes me a terrible host all of a sudden.
Emison.org as a collection of articles there. And I'm on Twitter at Joe Emison, where there's random stuff as well.
Perfect. Joe, I appreciate it. Thanks you so much.
No problem. Thanks a lot.